Hello, folks. Hope every one of you is doing good out there. This is your host Shahid Mahmood. I'm an economist by profession with around 2 decades of experience. This is your channel, Cafe Iktisad or Econ Cafe. If you haven't subscribed, please do. This is your channel for international and domestic economic news. If you head to the playlist, you can find short videos, you can find podcasts, and you can find vlogs in both Urdu and English. Let's hop into today's topic, which relates to Trump's administration's tariffs upon the rest of the world. I'm sure every one of you, even those who don't have much interest in economics, would know of it or would have heard of it. So yeah, we do know that Trump administration at the start of the year they've slapped tariffs, which is a tax upon things coming into the U.S. They've slapped a considerable amount of tariffs on all the nations in the world. It's not a uniform number. Some nations have been slapped with a higher tariff, some have been slapped with a lower tariff, but even the lower ones are considerable. So everybody knows that, yes, that they have slapped tariffs on that, the world. But what's the logic behind it? Now, this is an important question because yes, everybody has been analyzing, what is going to happen in the aftermath of tariffs. So are things going to what's going to happen in the world, what's going to happen in the US economy, are things going to get dearer than they are, or are their prices going to increase? What would happen to goods and services in the US? What would happen to goods and services in the rest of the world? How would it change the patterns of trade around the world? These are some of the questions that are being queried. These are some of the questions that are being written about, uh, and only time would tell. It's difficult to contend or difficult to come up with a conclusion in the short run. These kind of policies, these kind of major changes, they require long-term analysis because all the nations, obviously those who have been slapped with sanctions, they are going to come up with their own strategies, own policies, and in the long run things do tend to take some final shape. But anyways, one of the things that I find missing, or at least I haven't read much about it, is trying to understand the logic of these tariffs. And it's an important question because if you have to do an analysis, if you have to query these kind of questions, you do need to understand the logic behind it. And it's not that Trump just woke up one day and he said that, look, I'm going to slap sanctions upon all the world because I just want to do it. Yes, that is how he is. But the thing is that it's not like that. It's not that just he just woke up and at the spur of the moment he said that I'm going to slap tariffs upon the world. There's a logic behind it, and for understanding that logic, it's important, if you have to analyze it, understand that logic comes, if you want to understand it, you have to go and see or read an article by the present US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He wrote something about it about even before the elections last year in the US. That article is available on the net. It's a pretty lengthy article. I'm not going to go into the details of that. So I'm going to give you a lowdown or a summary of that article and what he said, and which will help you understanding the context of all this. So Scott wrote a lengthy article, and his basic argument was that, look, the world has been very unfair to us. The trading system, the way we've been doing trade, it's been pretty unfair to us, and this can't go on because it has been affecting us. It has been affecting the prosperity. So all those decades of trade, the world has been feeding off of our prosperity, off of the US economy. We've been helping out the world, but in return, the world hasn't been helping us out. In fact, we've been bearing the brunt of this. It's unfair because it's not good to us. Why isn't it good to us? Scott gives different example, but one of his main gripe, or one of his main argument was that, look at our manufacturing jobs. The United States, it used to be the manufacturing hub of the world. It was the leader in manufacturing, but now that has gone to the China. And the way China manufactures almost everything and at cost much lower than the US, Scott said that it's not just hurting the US, but it's also hurting all of the rest of the world. He points out to the loss of manufacturing jobs. He says that millions of US manufacturing jobs have been lost. Cities like Detroit, that were once manufacturing hubs or manufacturing powerhouses, manufacturers have closed shop over there and jobs have been lost just because we've been trading the way we've been trading with the world, especially with China. So their argument was that this needs to be reversed, this needs to end, the world needs to be fairer to us, and for making the world fairer to the US, their argument is that we need to impose tariffs upon the world, so that to make this field even and to bring back all those jobs to the US, to bring back prosperity to the US. Now remember that their rallying cry, MAGA, Make America Great Again. One of its aspects is that they're going to bring back all those jobs that have been lost to the world. And if you are following the US, you would have seen instances like President Trump meeting the Apple CEO Tim Cook and others, and kind of warning them or pushing them to hire the US labor rather than outsourcing all those jobs to India, China, and other parts of the world. So they're now, it's not just about slapping tariffs. They are the Trump administration. What they are doing is they are actively pushing their own CEOs towards their own goals, and their own goal, of course, as I explained, is that bring back all those jobs to the United States and make it a manufacturing hub again. So that's their logic. That's the as simple as it gets, and I hope I've explained it simply. Does it make any sense? What should we think of it? How do we analyze it? Before I go into the details and try to analyze what Scott is saying, or what the Trump administration has been doing, what Scott wrote, whether it's wrong or right, and what's wrong with it, and there's a lot wrong with it, which I'll explain briefly. There is one point that they've got right, and I'm not a supporter of Trump administration or any of their administrations for that respect. I'm not a US national, but one things, you have to be fair in these kind of arguments. You have to look at both sides of the coin. One point that the US has been, and for some time they have been trying to push this point across, that the level field or the playing field is not level for the United States of America compared to the rest of the world. And I'll give you a few examples that have happened previously over the last 1 or 2 decades. Now remember the case of Airbus versus Boeing. Boeing is a US manufacturer of civilian jets, and Airbus is a European manufacturer of the civilian jets. So these two are competitors in the world. They manufacture their airplanes. Boeing has its legendary line of 747s and these kind of airplanes. Airbus has its Europe has its Airbus, which is pretty famous. So they are competing. So one of the gripes that the US had, and they took it to a WTO, one of the complaints was that we haven't been subsidizing Boeing, meaning we haven't been helping them out financially. But instead, what the European Union has been doing is that they've been helping out, subsidizing the Airbus or the manufacturers of Airbus heavily. So that kind of that playing field, that kind of gets biased, or that kind of gets in favor of the manufacturers of Airbus, because they would be, with the government subsidy, they would be able to sell their airplanes cheaper to the world, and that was hurting Boeing's prospects. And Boeing is a US manufacturer. Then another of their complaints, which is quite logical, is that the kind of subsidies doled out to the manufacturers in the world, especially to the manufacturers in the world, as a percentage of GDP of the economy. If you look at the US percentage, it's quite low compared to other countries like the European Union region or China, or even some countries in Asia, South America. So if you, as a percentage of GDP, the benefits or the subsidies given to manufacturers in the US is much lower compared to them, which again means that the playing field or the competition is uneven in the world. It's not fair. So Till that point, they've got a point. It's a pretty fair point. Coming back to what Scott said, if you analyze it, there is a lot which is wrong with it, and I'm just going to go through a few arguments of why that is wrong in terms of historical context, in terms of empirics, and in terms of theory. Look, first of all, try to consider the fact that he's just talking about manufacturing jobs. So if you like, it's not the best indicator. If you have to look at the jobs in the economy, the jobs, if you have to look at jobs in the economy, you have to look at an indicator. There are many, but what I am more interested in, and what a lot of economists do look at, it's called net job creation. Net meaning the number of jobs created less than number of jobs destroyed. So if you look at the number of jobs created, the net job creation, actually it's been positive over the decades in the US. What has happened is that yes, manufacturing sector and manufacturing jobs have shrunk in the US, but at the same time, all those a lot more jobs have been created in the services sector, especially in the financial services sector in the US, in which US has a speciality. It has a comparative advantage, what we say. So if you look at the net job creation, actually it's not that bad. Yes, manufacturing jobs have shrunk in the US, but actually if you look at the Chinese figures, Chinese have been also losing manufacturing jobs. Its jobs have always they've all also shrunk because they've been also outsourcing some of their manufacturing work to countries like Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries. So it's not just one way. And if you look at the, you have to look at the net job creation numbers, and actually US has been doing pretty well. Second, about the current account deficits, one of the things that Scott mentioned in his article was that, look, if you look at the current account, we've been running a current account deficit since the 70s, and that's unfair. Well, you've been running a current account deficit, yes, but that hasn't hurt the US economy's prospect. That hasn't hurt the US economy's trailblazing success. It's the best performing economy in the last 4 or 5 decades. It's the most innovative, it's the most dynamic. As I said, the net job creation is positive. So the current account deficit hasn't hurt you, and you also have to recognize the fact, keep in mind that countries like Pakistan or China or India or Brazil or Argentina, if they have a current account deficit, they have to pay in dollars, which is not their currency. They can't print it. The US case is a special case. It's a different case because it's their own currency in which they are paying. Charles de Gaulle, actually the French president, he didn't like it at all, and he said that it's an exorbitant privilege. That's what he said, the term that he used. So the US has this exorbitant privilege. They have their dollar. Dollar is the leading currency in the world in terms of payments. And I mean, you look at the US, its current account deficit, they've been paying in dollars. That's their own currency. Any economist worth their salt would tell you that paying in your own currency isn't much of a problem at all. So you can also discount. I don't know why Scott discounts that possibility. That kind of also puts that dent in his argument. It's a weak argument. The third one, he says that yeah, the world has been investing in a kind of passive. It's a passive investment. It's U.S. Treasuries. They just put their money in there. They don't set up factories over there. They don't invest in brick and mortar infrastructure. The world needs to do that, and that's hurting us. Well, if you look at the numbers, the treasury numbers, it's a huge market. It's I think more than 30 trillion market. But if you look at the numbers, the number of the percentage of foreign investment in US treasuries, the total is hardly 7 or 8%. And I repeat, that's hardly 7 or 8%. Most of the investment in the US treasuries is actually by the US based institutions, like their retirement funds, their social security funds. So it's the US based institutions, it's their own domestic institutions that have been benefiting most from the US treasuries. It's not the foreign governments. It's only 6 or 7%. That's hardly anything. That's hardly anything. That's hardly of any consequence. So that argument is also wrong. That the world has been feeding off of our financial assets and making themselves good off of it. That's hardly 6 or 7%. The third, another point, the fourth point that I want to make is, it's it again brings the illogicality of Scott Bessent's argument, and I'll tell you why. Just a few months back, or about a month back, uh, Scott was present at a conference where he's trying to push, or the Trump administration is trying to push stable coins, the US dollar based stable coins. And I've already done a vlog on stable coins, which you can find in short vlogs or short econ series in the playlist. Look, if you are trying to, so this is contradictory, and this is incongruent with their what Scott is trying to argue, or what their argument about tariffs is. And I'll tell you why. If you are trying to push stable coins, and this is what he said, that stable coins, or the US dollar based stable coins, would increase the demand for our financial assets. Well, Scott, I mean, you've been griping about, you've been complaining about the US, the world investing just in US financial markets and not investing in brick and mortar and infrastructure. But here, you are doing the same thing. You are trying to raise the demand for US financial assets by introducing or pushing the US stable coins. But so these are two things, are, I don't know if he understands or not, these two things are contradictory. At one juncture, or at one side, what he is trying to do, or what the US administration is trying to do, is to push the world off of US financial assets. But on the other side, they are trying to incentivize or encourage investment in the US financial assets. So how does that work out? That is baffling. Another argument that I want to make, and which makes that argument for tariffs weak, is that they've already tried it. In the first US administration, if Trump administration, they imposed a quite considerable amount of tariffs on Chinese steel and all the steel coming from the world. So it's basically, it was, most of it was coming into the US from China. So they imposed pretty heavy tariffs on that. But the end result was that there wasn't much job creation at all. But what happened was that whatever was being manufactured in the US using their own steel, things became pretty expensive, because the Chinese steel was pretty inexpensive. But the same thing that you are trying to produce in the US, it became quite expensive. So that kind of serves as a lesson for every policymaker, that if you can't just push manufacturing, or you can't just put your foot down and say that manufacturing is going to take place over here. Manufacturers have to see incentives, manufacturers have to see the cost of production, manufacturers have to consider many things, risks, different things, financing. So it's not just that you can push or shove manufacturers into a corner and tell them that, look, start manufacturing here, you can't go anywhere else, and we are not going to buy from the world, because in most cases it would end up hurting yourself. And that is what happened in the case of Trump's tariffs on steel, the Chinese steel. Then, as I said, during the Biden administration, they tried to push chip manufacturing in the US. It is taking place, but reports suggest that it's not that successful compared to, for example, Taiwan, which is the powerhouse in chip making. So because they are finding it difficult to manufacture over there given the cost of production, and a lot of that cost of production is due to the wages, which is pretty high compared to the world, wages of labor and other costs associated with it. So the lesson is that you can't just push manufacturing is more than just saying that I'm going to impose tariffs on it and manufacturing is going to come back to the United States. It's not going to happen. Another point, the last one that I'd like to put forth in all this argument, and which makes that this argument on tariffs quite weak, is that it's not that US isn't manufacturing anything. You have to look at your comparative advantage in all these circumstances. The US has been selling the whole world, and it's a leader in different kind of things. And I'll tell you one thing: defense manufacturing, defense related. It's jet fighters, it's defense technology, it's missiles, it's jet fighters, it's aircrafts, it's submarines, it other electronic systems, electronic countermeasure system. They've been pretty successful, and nobody can match the US when it comes to defense equipment, and the world is buying from them. So US already has a comparative advantage in there. It's not that the US has that the manufacturing jobs have completely gone out of the US. Then you also have the US education system. The top universities in the world are still the universities like MIT, Harvard, these kind of universities. So US has a comparative advantage. The whole world goes there. The whole world sends their scientists, their kids, because the US has a comparative advantage. It's the best system in the world. So it's not all doom and gloom for the US when it comes to manufacturing or when it comes to comparative advantage. Yes, China has made great strides, but that is what the history tells us, because it's not that one power that was once a manufacturing powerhouse will always remain. So you have the case of Britain, then you go back all the way to the Roman Empire, that was a manufacturing hub, that was a manufacturing powerhouse in the world. But over time, that advantage, due to different circumstances, due to technological prowess and other factors in other regions of the world, that kind of dissipates. So that is what is happening to the US. Now remember, when the US hit a peak as a manufacturing power, who suffered? It was Britain that dissipated, that used to be a manufacturing hub of the world, and then and it started declining because the US, in comparison, their manufacturing rose, it became more sophisticated. So that's the lesson of history. That's the lesson that that's how the world works. So you can't just push things. So I don't know what is going to happen. I can't tell you. There is no way that somebody can tell you exactly what's going to happen due to these tariffs. But as I said, only in the long run or in the middle run are we going to get some results that can tell us what's happening and what was the end result of those tariffs. But what I can tell you, what this what this vlog was about, was that if you look at it logically, it doesn't make much sense. A lot of Scott's argument, a lot of Trump administration's argument, they are wrong. They don't make any sense. They are illogical. So, folks, that was vlog for today, and I hope to see you again in the future. Please stay put, and again, if you haven't subscribed, do subscribe. I'll be back with more podcasts. You take care. Bye bye.